as I was introduced, I'm from Sayota, a South African architectural company. Over the years, let me just turn this off. Okay, great. We've built. We've been going for about 25 years now. We started as an architectural practice, and we struggled over years with the way our buildings were finished internally. So we built an interior design and an interior architecture practice. And then we're far away from almost everywhere. So we ended up having to design and manufacture our own furniture to control the interior guys. So we've ended up with this building in Cape Town where we. Sorry, that's the wrong button. Start again. Where we have our studios in this space. So 3 levels of studio here. We've just actually converted this level to a design studio for the interior architects, and we've got our furniture showroom here and some apartments here. And it's a great city to work in. You can see Table Mountain rising a kilometre above the city in the background there. So we feel quite privileged, to kind of be this engaged with the world, but to work out of such an extraordinary city. About half of our work is. Yeah. Okay. We've ended up not working much in South Africa anymore. About 25%, 85% of our work is outside of South Africa, and it's spread quite widely across the globe. I think what is unique about us for a company that does work this internationally is the amount of engagement that we have with Africa, which is a continent that many people outside of Africa know very little about. And we've been busy with projects, or we've worked on projects in about 29 countries across the continent now. Identity is something that we've been interested in our work. And I thought that this was an interesting opportunity to try and crystallize some ideas for ourselves about identity and our thoughts about our work. And I thought what I'd do is show you a little bit of what's going on in Africa and some of the trends that are shaping its future. And then I'd show you some of the work done by African architects that inspires us, and some of the work that we've been doing. Culture and identity are obviously important architectural tools, especially as we move forward and try and reflect our societies and resist the increasing homogenization of the built environment. Everywhere is becoming everywhere. Everywhere is starting to look the same, and I think that increasingly this is an issue we need to take on board, and we need to understand how we live in a modern, contemporary, connected world, but we still reflect our own identities. One of the problems that we have with Africa, or this idea of an African identity, is that there's this very strong idea that people have of Africa and of Africanness, which is very problematic, and it's something that we've resisted for a long time. There's no singular African identity. I think Africa, especially sub-Saharan Africa, gets seen as a single element, and it's not. It's an incredibly complex place and a complex group of societies. I think the more you kind of engage with it and try and understand if there is such a thing as Africa, the more you actually start to realize that it's flimsy and it perhaps doesn't even exist. So we've kind kind of got to this point where we've realized that there is no, it's impossible. There's no such thing as an African identity. The continent and its peoples are, it's one of the biggest land masses. And the continent's people and cultures are absolutely extraordinary and incredibly diverse. If you look back in history a little bit, you find the pyramids of the Kushite kingdoms in Sudan, south of Egypt. These extraordinary works of art from the Benin Empire in Nigeria. The great structures at Great Zimbabwe. You find lost civilizations all over the continent. These are ruins in Mpumalanga in South Africa. Extraordinary architecture. These are the buildings of the Hausa. The gate to the palace of the Emir of Zazu in Nigeria. Muslim houses in Cameroon. Decorated buildings of the casino. Burkina Faso. Dogon villages built into the Bandagara escarpment in Malawi. Kasubi tombs in Uganda and Kampala. In Ethiopia, 900-year-old churches carved out of solid rock. In the Sahel, these enormous mosques built out of mud that need to be repaired every year after the rains. In Zululand, where I spent time as a child, these beehive huts. Down the east coast, the Swahili coast of Africa, influences from Arabia and India. And these textiles from different parts of Africa, different sculpture. I think what is common to these works and to these buildings is an expression really of the human condition and of human genius. There's no common African identity that runs through these pieces. They reflect the specific communities, times and places that they were made in. So where did the idea of Africa come from? The idea of Africa in many ways is an invention of Europe. 2,300 years ago, Aristotle said that there's always something new coming out of Africa, and he was associating Africa not with novel interest, but with the strange and undesirable. This sense of the unknown and of the other is one of the reasons why it was so easy for the slave route to take root, and why it was possible to take. These are, millions of people were exported to the Americas and to Europe from West Africa particularly. Why it was so easy to take this incredible mosaic of people. This is what Africa's map should really look like if it's broken down into its linguistic and cultural regions, and turn it into this, really just a big chunk of real estate serving Europe's colonial masters. The other issue that we have as Africans is that we're not good at telling our own stories. I think countries like India and China share many of the problems that our countries share, but we let others tell our stories. And the stories that are often told are stories of war, despair, or stories populated by lions, zebras, giraffes, strange exotic people, strange forms and strange colours. I think that there's something that's become very entrenched, unfortunately, in the world about this idea of Africa and the exotic and the other, and it's unhelpful, and it's something that we definitely not interested in. I think our interests are more in trying to understand what's particular to a project or challenge, and what's particular to the place and the time that it finds itself in. If you take Alan Yuxi's extraordinary work, for example, he's a Ghanaian artist who teaches at the University of Nsukka in Nigeria. And he creates these enormous wall hangings out of found objects. These formal pieces really represent some of the best contemporary art produced in the world today. And they come out of a very different Africa, a contemporary place that's immeasurably complex, diverse, and one that has space for death metal rock bands in places like Congo and Angola, and one that allows cities like Dakar in Senegal to be one of the world's great surf cities. These are stories that aren't told, or experiences that nobody knows about. One of the messages is, I think, and this perhaps goes to the 2025 vision and beyond, is that Africa is not other. Africa is going to become the new normal. Africa has been transformed by one of the most dramatic population surges the planet's ever seen. Combined with incredible urbanization and economic growth, these forces are going to shift Africa from the perimeter to the center. Africa will be the new normal. This is Dakar at the end of the 40s. It was really just a city that existed here. Last year it looked something like this. The entire peninsula has grown. And these are very much the kinds of things that have been happening in India as well. So I think there's a kind of common problem. One of the extraordinary things about Africa, though, again, that people don't talk about is that this enormous growth has been, these cities work. They might not look like European cities, but people work, they're productive, they're fed, they go to school, they're real living places. And these are countries that were, at the end of colonization, were literally stripped of everything. Money, skills, it's been a long, hard journey. Parts of Nigeria already have population densities that you only see in places like India and China. This is about 250 kilometers across here. That's 20 million people in Lagos. All of these white marks are cities and towns. Lagos in 1950 had 250,000 people, over 20 million today. Today, Africa has 1 billion people in 54 countries. By the turn of the century, it will have 4 billion people, which will represent 75% of the world's population growth. But at the turn of the century, half the world's children will be African. So you can see in this slide how there's growth in Asia, there's a bulge, which flattens out towards the end of the century. The rest of the world really is pretty static. And then there's this enormous bulge that comes out of Africa at the end of the century. Here again you see Asia's population rising and then stabilizing. These are high-end projections and low-end projections. The rest of the world down at the bottom here, and Africa soaring to meet Asia's population. Growing economies are also starting to transform our cities. So cities that were moribund for decades have come to life. This is Dar es Salaam, which I first saw in 1989, and it was really a kind of a 4 or 5 story city building, 1 or 2 larger buildings. And it's really unrecognizable now. This is Rwanda, which went through one of the most traumatic civil wars, which ended a while back, and there's this tremendous, it's oil driven, but it's still extraordinary growth. They've rebuilt the entire promenade here. Addis Ababa is an enormous country, 90 million strong, also coming to life. This is downtown Nairobi, which has had good years and bad years. It's in a good place at the moment. This is a view looking down towards the city, and you can see the impact that the growing middle class is starting to have on the housing market. Africa, of course, like any other society, has tremendous problems with corruption and wastefulness. This is the largest basilica on earth in Yamoussoukro in Ivory Coast. Senegal, for some reason, decided to build a statue larger than the Statue of Liberty to celebrate the African family. So that was, the North Koreans helped with that. And this is a palace that's under construction in Equatorial Guinea, which until 2000 was literally the poorest country on earth. I mentioned Nigeria earlier. Nigeria really is going to change the planet. By the end of the century, the United Nations thinks that Nigeria will have 910 million people, and that 1 in 12 births on the planet will be in Nigeria. That's more people than North America and Western Europe put together. Its economy is growing, despite the bad oil price at the moment, and Nigeria is now Africa's largest economy. And they're spending money. This is Nigeria is just starting to make cars, and Toyota reckons they can, if they're up to full production in Nigeria, they'd sell 1 million cars a year. These are cars that have been imported from second-hand cars that have been imported from Japan, and they're sitting in yards in Benin, down the road from Lagos, waiting to be taken across the border. This is Lagos, or the older part of Lagos, Lagos Island, Victoria Island, Koi, and then the bridges that connect to the mainland. It really is a crazy city. You know, it's gone from, as I said, about 250,000 people 50, 60 years ago to 20 million plus today, and it's growing. And it really is going to be the economic heart. Well, it is the economic heart of the continent. And it's a crazy city, you know, it has layers of history. Some of these older structures were built by slaves who returned from Brazil. It has very little, the state's very dysfunctional and the infrastructure is really run down. But it does have a vibrant private sector, it has oil, it's a rich country. And one of the things that's starting to happen is that the private sector is outpacing the state. So this is Victoria Island. This is a 9 square kilometer chunk of real estate that's being rebuilt out of reclaimed out of the Atlantic Ocean. This, like many other big building projects we see around the world, looks like it could be anywhere. It ultimately house up to 400,000 people, with literally at this point no services connected back into the city. So it's an island off of the city. This is Abuja, the master plan for Abuja, a city that was the capital that started in the early 80s. Big commercial projects. So, with all of this work going on, you think Africa would be a very exciting place to be working as an architect, particularly in real estate and housing. But unfortunately, this is the kind of thing that's being built. So, I think banal's a better description. Now, our cities are being overwhelmed by mediocrity, driven by profit, I suppose. And this kind of fantasy. This is a housing project that's been built outside of Luanda. And this is one of the big challenges we have for architects is to how do we deal with this? How do we rise to the challenge to take commissions and actually do something special with them? Because the architects behind these projects, you know, and I think there's a lesson in that. They're meaningless, you know. They don't relate to anything. So, in terms of some of our architectural references, this is the work of a guy called Demis Nokpo in Nigeria. Very interesting form. He's a very interesting architect, Zavako, who worked in Morocco in beautiful forms. We're quite interested in form, you can see. This is an architect by the name of a guy called Pierre Goodeby, who did a lot of work in the 60s and 70s across Francophone West Africa. Really an attempt to find an identity that people felt belonged to them. Danjul's Airport. This is in Congo, Brazzaville. Dakar. That's in Loma. In South Africa, one of the architects that we've always been quite inspired by is a guy called Claude Fagan, whose interpretation of traditional Cape architecture is very powerful. In Mozambique, the magician Pancho Guedes. And I think what comes out of this is that these architects do create buildings that do fit and do resonate in their cities, and they feel a lot of these buildings really couldn't belong anywhere else. Cote d'Ivoire. It's the cathedral in Cote d'Ivoire. So that's the context that our work finds itself in. And I think one of the things that we try to do is find solutions that do respond to the cities and the context that they find themselves in. And hopefully these responses create identities that are appropriate for the cities and places that they're in. The first series of buildings I'm going to show you are for a Senegalese client who's developing a 3-star hotel brand called Moon that he intends to roll out in 17 countries from Mauritania to Kenya. The first hotel is about to open in Conakry in Guinea. This building, which ran into the whole Ebola epidemic, and the site was shut down for months with guys not willing to go to the harbour to collect building product. And these buildings aren't formed by an idea of luxury and convenience and reflect some of the architectural language that you see in these cities. I think we've then broken our buildings down into a series of categories that loosely reflect a series of themes and interests that we pursue. One of the smaller groups is called Luso-Africa, which is a series of designs in countries that have a Portuguese heritage or colonial history and reflect having a Portuguese-inflected design. This is a corporate office in Luanda and Angola that we're working on. This is a villa in Angola as well that's about to go to site. The next area is we do a lot of work in the tropical climates of West and Central Africa. And these are a series of buildings that need to protect themselves from the sun and rain, creating shaded, ventilated spaces that people can inhabit. And often the screen, this is a little housing project in Abidjan. So you get these kinds of quite deep overhangs and ventilated screens that allow for cross-ventilation. This is an office building that's under construction in Lagos. This shading screen that sits over the, it sits between the equator and the tropics, so we have probably north and south aspect to the sun at different times of the year. This is a residential project in the Congo, which is a large, I suppose, a villa sitting up here, and then a series of smaller apartments running down the building. This is a built project in Lagos in Nigeria. Again, a series of apartments with a large villa sitting up above them. With this big pergola screen that creates a big protected space at the top. This is a smaller project in Durban, in South Africa, with a series of, this is a folded powder-coated aluminium screen that faces, one of the issues we have is that our coastline either faces due east into the rising sun or due west into the setting sun. So one of the ways we deal with it is by using screens like this, which sit back from the glass facade, which create lovely spaces like this. This is actually an external space. This is a project in the Congo as well. Again, this idea of these big kind of outdoor spaces that just have hats on them. Another apartment building in Congo. And some of these buildings also try to be quite playful, and they definitely try to refer back to some of the work that was done by architects in the 60s and 70s. In these kinds of spaces where we're lucky with climate, but we're always conscious of trying to be quite ambiguous about what's inside or outside. I think it's one of the things we try and do is let people live outside as much as possible, and then have the opportunity to kind of close up the spaces if they need to. This is a courtyard house in Lagos. You know, Lagos, the problem with one of the issues with a lot of these cities is that they really are intense urban spaces. So it's quite important to be able to create these much quieter spaces where you can retreat from the city and still, I suppose, have some kind of engagement with the view, but if you want to feel like the city doesn't exist. Another set of buildings that we've done are buildings that we see as as characters that inhabit an urban landscape. Kind of people. This is a project for a set of towers in Dakar in Senegal. An apartment building in Rwanda. Again, buildings that have human characteristics. This is a project for an apartment building in Lagos. Many of these buildings are in quite intense urban environments again. This is a shopping or multi-use center that's been built in Douala, in Cameroon. It's got a basement of parking, it's got shopping, it's got offices, it's got a kind of convention center sitting up here and a hotel on top. I think these kinds of complex buildings offer some solutions for how you keep or how you retain complexity in cities. A lot of our buildings, these single-use buildings, just really dumb down the streets. This is a project in Alexandra Township in Johannesburg, where there's a major taxi rank here. And the idea, ultimately, instead of letting the taxi rank inhabit this urban space, was to put the rank up on the roof of the building, and then insert this shopping center down underneath the center. It works for the shopping center because you can't get onto a taxi or leave a taxi without walking through the retail